Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The cop's flashlight beam cut through my truck's windshield like a judgment from God himself. I squinted, tasting the stale coffee and defeat that had become my breakfast for the past 3 weeks. "Sir, you can't park here overnight," Officer Martinez said, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and pity that made my skin crawl. I sat up, my back screaming from another night spent curled around the steering wheel of my beat-up Ford F-150. Outside the passenger window, the rusted sign of Thompson's Landscaping swayed in the October wind, the words barely visible through the spray paint someone had tagged across it. My life's work, reduced to graffiti canvas. "Morning to you too, officer," I said, rolling down the window. The crisp upstate New York air bit at my face. "Just catching up on some sleep before the big board meeting." Martinez didn't laugh. They never did anymore. "Tom, you know I don't want to write you up, but Mrs. Henderson called again. Says you're making the neighborhood look bad." Henderson, 73 years old, 3 cats, and a phone permanently attached to her ear. She'd been one of my best customers for 15 years until my father-in-law decided I wasn't worthy of breathing the same air as his precious daughter. "Tell Mrs. Henderson the first I'll be gone soon enough," I said, turning the key. The engine coughed like a dying man. "Just as soon as I figure out where the hell I'm supposed to go." "Huh." Martinez stepped back as I pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I watched him shake his head. Poor bastard probably went home to a wife who still talked to him, kids who didn't screen his calls, and a bed that didn't smell like motor oil and broken dreams. I drove through downtown Millbrook, past the coffee shop where Sarah used to meet me for lunch, past the hardware store where I'd bought supplies for jobs that seemed like they belonged to someone else's life. The town looked different when you were living in your truck. Smaller, meaner, like it was judging every choice that led you to sleep in a parking lot. My phone buzzed against the dashboard. Sarah's name flashed on the cracked screen, and for a split second, my heart jumped. Maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she realized that 22 years of marriage meant something more than her father's bank account. "Tom, we need to talk about the divorce papers." Her voice was ice cold, professional, the same tone she used with telemarketers. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said, pulling into the parking lot of Mickey's Diner. "Let me guess, Daddy found another clause he wants to add?" "Don't be sarcastic. This is hard enough without your attitude." "Hard enough, right. Because having your wife's father systematically destroy your business while she watched was a walk in the park for me." "What does Richard want now?" I asked. Richard Blackwood III, heir to old money and older prejudices. The man who'd spent 5 years smiling at family dinners while planning my professional execution. "He thinks you should sign the papers without a lawyer. It would save everyone time and money." I laughed, and it came out bitter as burnt coffee. "Save everyone money? Sarah, your father cost me everything I had. My business, my house, my reputation. What exactly am I supposed to save money for?" "That's not fair, Tom. You know Daddy didn't. Your daddy blacklisted me from every decent contract in 3 counties. He called in favors with the bank to foreclose on my equipment loans. He even got his golf buddies to spread rumors that I was using undocumented workers." My voice was rising, and the few customers in Mickey's were starting to stare. "So forgive me if I'm not real concerned about saving Richard Blackwood the cost of a legal fight." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was softer, almost like the woman I'd married. "Tom, I know this is difficult, but we can't keep living like this. Emma barely speaks to you anymore. She's embarrassed to tell her friends what happened." Emma, our 19-year-old daughter, home from college for the semester, who looked at me like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe, the girl I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, and saved for college since she was born. Now she was Team Blackwood, complete with the family uniform of disappointment and disgust. "Maybe Emma should ask her grandfather why her father is living in his truck," I said. "You're living in your truck because you're too proud to get a regular job. Tom, Mr. Peterson offered you work at the garden center. It's honest work. Honest work, minimum wage, part-time, working for a man who used to buy mulch from me by the truckload." Richard Blackwood's final insult, wrapped in charity. "I'll think about it," I lied. "The papers are at Davidson's office. Just, please think about what's best for everyone." She hung up, and I stared at the phone until the screen went black. What's best for everyone? In Sarah's world, that meant I'd disappear quietly, maybe move to another state, and let the Blackwoods rewrite history. Tom Thompson, The landscaper who couldn't cut it. The husband who wasn't good enough. The father who embarrassed his own daughter. I was about to start the truck when Martinez pulled up beside me, his patrol car's window already down. "Tom, I need you to step out of the vehicle." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. This wasn't about parking violations. "What's the problem, officer?" "Just step out, please. Keep your hands visible." I climbed out slowly, my mind racing. Had Richard finally decided to have me arrested for something? It wouldn't be hard to manufacture evidence. The Blackwoods had connections everywhere. Martinez walked around his car, his hand resting on his radio. "Tom, I ran your license through the system, and something came up. Something big." "Like what?" "Like a federal flag from 1987. Homeland Security wants to talk to you." I stared at him. Homeland Security? Martinez, what the hell are you talking about? In 1987, I was 6 years old. I know it sounds crazy, but I've got orders to bring you in. Federal marshals are on their way. The parking lot of Mickey's Diner suddenly felt like the center of the universe, and not in a good way. Federal marshals, Homeland Security, a flag from when I was 6. "This is insane," I said. But Martinez was already reaching for his handcuffs. "I'm sorry, Tom. I really am." As the cuffs clicked around my wrists, I wondered if this was rock bottom or just another stop on the way down. The federal building in Albany smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I'd been sitting in a windowless room for 3 hours, handcuffed to a table, wondering if my life could get any more surreal. The answer, apparently, was yes. Agent Patricia Wells looked like she'd stepped out of a recruiting poster for competent government employees. Mid-40s, gray suit, eyes that had seen enough bullshit to power a small city. She sat across from me with a file thick enough to choke a horse. "Mr. Thompson, what do you remember about your adoption?" "My adoption?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong guy. I wasn't adopted, born and raised right here in Millbrook." Agent Wells opened the file and slid a photograph across the table. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, standing next to a woman I'd never seen before. The boy had my eyes, my stubborn chin, my crooked smile. This photograph was taken in Brussels, Belgium, in 1986. The woman is Marguerite Dubois, and according to our records, she's your biological mother. The room tilted sideways. "That's impossible." Is it? Tell me about your earliest memories, Mr. Thompson." I tried to think back, but everything before first grade was fuzzy, like looking through dirty glass. "There was an accident. My parents died in a car crash when I was young. The Blackwoods took me in, raised me like their own son." "The Blackwoods took you in, yes. But there was no car crash, Tom. No dead parents. Just a little boy who disappeared from Brussels and turned up in upstate New York with a new identity and a very convenient story." Agent Wells slid another document across the table. It was covered in official seals and signatures I couldn't read. "Your biological father, Henry Dubois, owed a substantial amount of money to some very dangerous people. When he couldn't pay, they took you as collateral. You were sold to a network that specialized in placing children with wealthy American families who wanted to avoid the traditional adoption process." The words hit me like physical blows. Sold, collateral, stolen. "You're saying the Blackwoods bought me?" "We're saying the Blackwoods paid a significant sum to acquire a child with no legal paper trail. A child who would be completely dependent on their goodwill and generosity." The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Richard's constant reminders that I owed everything to his family. Sarah's assumption that I should be grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. The way they'd all acted like I was a charity case who'd forgotten his place. Because that's exactly what I was. "Where's my mother now?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Brussels. She never stopped looking for you, Tom. Never stopped hoping you'd come home." Agent Wells stood up and walked to the door. "Pack a bag, Mr. Thompson. You're taking a trip." 18 hours later, I was standing in the living room of a house that smelled like lavender and old books. Marguerite Dubois was smaller than I'd expected. Her gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, her hands shaking as she reached toward my face. "Mon fils," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. My son. I didn't speak French, but I understood. This woman had spent 34 years wondering if her little boy was alive, while I'd spent 34 years believing I was an orphan saved by the kindness of strangers. The translator, a patient woman named Claire, helped us navigate the conversation. Marguerite told me about my father's gambling debts, about the men who came in the night, about the decades she'd spent working with international authorities to find me. She showed me photographs of the life I'd been stolen from, birthday parties I'd never attended, Christmas mornings I'd never seen, a family that had never stopped loving me. She wants you to know, Claire translated, that your father died 5 years ago. He never forgave himself for what happened. I looked around the house, at the photographs covering every surface, at the room that had been kept exactly as I'd left it 34 years ago. Toys on the shelves, clothes in the closet, a bed that had been waiting for a little boy who never came home. Tell her I'm sorry, I said. Tell her I never knew. Marguerite smiled through her tears and spoke rapidly to Claire. She says there's nothing to forgive. She says you're home now, and that's all that matters. But there was more. There was always more. Marguerite led me to a study lined with legal documents and bank statements. Through Claire, she explained that my grandfather had been a successful businessman, that the family had money, property, investments that had been held in trust for my return. How much money? I asked. Claire and Marguerite exchanged words in rapid French. Approximately $12 million, American, plus the properties in Brussels and the south of France. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. $12 million, properties in Europe, a family trust that had been waiting for me for over 3 decades. Richard Blackwood had stolen a child and turned him into a servant, all while sitting on the knowledge that the kid he was treating like garbage was worth more than the Blackwood family fortune. The irony was so perfect, it almost made me laugh. Almost. I need to go home, I told Claire. I need to go back to New York. Marguerite looked concerned, speaking quickly to the translator. She wants to know why you'd want to go back to the people who kept you from her. I thought about Sarah, about Emma, about Richard Blackwood and his smug certainty that I'd always be beneath his notice. I thought about sleeping in my truck and begging for work from men who used to respect me. Tell her I have some unfinished business to take care of. Marguerite studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. She spoke to Claire, who smiled. She says you have your grandfather's eyes. She says he never let anyone push him around either. 3 days later, I was back in Millbrook. But everything had changed. I had money now, real money, the kind of money that could buy justice, or at least a very satisfying form of revenge. I checked into the Marriott downtown, ordered room service, and took the longest hot shower of my life. Then I sat on the bed and made a phone call. Fitz, it's Tom. You still got that gym downtown? Mike Fitzgerald had been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world with our fists and our attitudes. He'd opened a boxing gym after his army service, and it had become the unofficial headquarters for guys like us, men who worked with their hands and settled their problems face to face. Tom, Jesus, where the hell have you been? I heard you were living in your truck. Long story. Listen, I need a favor. I need somewhere to plan a war. Fitz was quiet for a moment. What kind of war? The kind where the good guys win for once. Come on down, brother. We'll figure it out. I hung up and looked out the hotel window at the town that had watched me fall without lifting a finger to help. Millbrook looked different from the 8th floor. Smaller, more manageable. Like something that could be conquered. Fitz's gym occupied the basement of a building that had seen better decades. The smell of sweat, leather, and determination hit me as I walked down the stairs, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was home. Holy shit, Tom. You look like death warmed over. Mike Fitzgerald hadn't changed much since high school. Still built like a brick wall. Still sporting the same crew cut he'd worn in the army. Still blessed with the ability to say exactly what everyone else was thinking. Thanks for the pep talk, coach. I'm serious. When's the last time you ate a real meal? Or slept in a bed? About 12 hours ago, actually. Things have changed, Fitz. I told him everything. The federal agents, Brussels, my real mother, the money. Fitz listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So let me get this straight. The Blackwoods basically bought you as a kid, treated you like shit for 34 years, and now you find out you're richer than they are? That's the short version, and you want revenge? I want justice. There's a difference. Fitz grinned, and it wasn't a nice expression. No, there isn't. Not when you've been screwed as hard as you have. What do you need? Information. I need to know everything about Richard Blackwood, his business, his secrets. I need to know who Sarah's been spending time with. And I need to know why my so-called friends turned their backs on me. That last one's easy. They turned their backs because they're cowards. But the other stuff, that's going to take some work. Fitz walked over to a battered desk in the corner and pulled out a business card. Riley Carson, best private investigator in the county. She's expensive, but she's worth it. Tell her I sent you. Riley Carson's office was above a pawn shop on the wrong side of town. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with short dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked me up and down like she was calculating how much trouble I was worth. Fitz says you need information about the Blackwood family. That's right. Divorce case? Something like that.
I cheated on you with your brother. What's wrong?
I will not forgive you for this!
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Riley leaned back in her chair. Mr. Thompson, I know who you are. This whole town knows your story. Successful businessman brought low by circumstances beyond his control. It's very sad, very sympathetic. But that's not the whole story, is it? Nobody gets destroyed as thoroughly as you were without making some serious enemies. So what really happened? I liked her already. Richard Blackwood happened. He decided I wasn't good enough for his daughter, and he systematically destroyed my business to prove it. How? He called in favors, got me blacklisted from municipal contracts, spread rumors about my work quality, had the bank call in my equipment loans early. Death by 1,000 cuts. Riley made notes on a legal pad. And your wife watched it happen, maybe even helped. Kids? One daughter. 19. She's picked her side, and it's not mine. Riley looked up from her notes. What do you want me to find? Everything. Business records, personal relationships, financial irregularities. I want to know where the bodies are buried. That kind of investigation takes time and money. We're talking about weeks of work, maybe months. I pulled out my checkbook, the new one, connected to the account in Brussels. How much? 10,000 as a retainer, another 20 if I find what you're looking for. I wrote the check without hesitation. Riley's eyebrows went up when she saw the amount. Circumstances change, I said. Apparently they do. I'll have preliminary information for you in a week. I left Riley's office and drove through town, really looking at it for the first time in months. Millbrook was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where secrets were currency and reputation was everything. It was also the kind of place where the right information, properly applied, could bring down kings, or at least small-town royalty. My phone rang as I was pulling into the hotel parking garage. Sarah's name on the display. Tom, where are you? I went by Mickey's and Martinez said you'd been arrested. Not arrested, questioned. It's been resolved, questioned about what? Family business. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Tom, you're scaring me. You sound different. Maybe I am different. We need to talk about the divorce, about Emma, about what happens next. You're right, we do need to talk. But not yet. I'm not ready. What do you mean you're not ready? Tom, we can't keep living in limbo. Give me 2 weeks, Sarah. 2 weeks to get my affairs in order. Your affairs? Tom, what affairs? You don't have a job, you don't have a house, you don't have anything to get in order. The old Tom would have taken that shot and asked for another. The new Tom just smiled. 2 weeks, Sarah. Then we'll settle everything. I hung up and sat in the hotel parking garage, thinking about the conversation. Sarah sounded nervous, maybe even scared. Good. She should be scared. They all should be. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Heard you were back in town. We should talk. Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison, my former best friend, my daughter's godfather, the man who'd stood up at my wedding and promised to always have my back. Right up until Richard Blackwood made it clear that associating with Tom Thompson was bad for business. I texted back. Mickey's Diner. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. His response came immediately. See you there. I drove to Fitz's gym and found him closing up for the night. How'd it go with Riley? She's on the case. Fitz, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Shoot. When everything went to hell, when I lost the business and Sarah left, why didn't you turn your back on me, like everyone else? Fitz locked the front door and turned to face me. You really want to know? Yeah, because I've been where you are. Maybe not exactly the same situation, but I've been at the bottom, looking up at people who used to respect me. And I remember who helped me climb back up, and who kicked dirt in my face while I was down there. Who helped you? You did, you dumb bastard. When I came back from Iraq with a head full of bad memories and a drinking problem, you gave me work when nobody else would hire me. You loaned me money to start this place. You never asked for anything back, never made me feel like charity. I'd forgotten about that. It seemed like a lifetime ago. So when your world fell apart, Fitz continued, I figured it was my turn to return the favor. Besides, I never liked that father-in-law of yours. Always struck me as the kind of guy who'd kick a dog just to watch it limp. He's worse than that. Yeah? How much worse? I told him about Brussels, about being stolen as a child, about the Blackwoods buying me like a piece of furniture. Fitz was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly calm. Tom, whatever you're planning, whatever you need, I'm in. 100%. It might get ugly. Good. I like ugly. Ugly is honest. We shook hands in the dim light of the empty gym, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from having nothing left to lose, but the solid, dangerous kind that comes from having the resources to fight back. Richard Blackwood had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that destroying Tom Thompson meant the game was over. He was about to learn the difference between destroying a man and defeating him. Mickey's Diner at 8 in the morning was a shrine to cholesterol and small-town gossip. I arrived early and took a booth in the back, where I could watch the door and listen to the conversations around me. Amazing how much you could learn about a town when people thought you didn't matter anymore. Jake Morrison walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, looking like success in a $500 suit. He'd put on weight since I'd seen him last, the kind of soft prosperity that came from too many business lunches and not enough honest work. He spotted me and walked over with the cautious expression of a man approaching a wounded animal. Tom, you look better than I expected. Clean clothes and a hot shower work wonders. Sit down, Jake. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes darting around the diner like he was afraid someone might see us together. I heard you were living in your truck. I heard you got the Henderson account. Jake had the decency to look embarrassed. Mrs. Henderson's yard had been one of my regular jobs for 15 years. The day after Richard Blackwood started his campaign against me, she'd called Jake Morrison's landscaping service. Tom, I want you to know, I didn't go after your clients. They came to me. After Richard Blackwood told them I was finished. I don't know anything about that. I leaned forward. Jake, we've known each other for 20 years. We were best men at each other's weddings. Our kids grew up together. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you don't know what happened. Jake stared down at his coffee cup. What do you want me to say, Tom? That I should have turned down paying customers out of loyalty to you? That I should have risked my own business to make a point? I want you to say you're sorry. I want you to admit that you stabbed me in the back for money. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Jake looked up, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man I used to call friend. It was survival, Tom. Richard Blackwood made it clear that anyone who did business with you would have problems. Real problems. I've got employees, a mortgage, kids in college. I couldn't afford to be noble, so you sold me out. I protected my family. I nodded slowly. I understand. I really do. But here's what I don't understand, Jake. Why are you here? Why did you want to talk? Jake shifted uncomfortably. I heard some things about you coming into money, about you hiring investigators. Interesting. Where did you hear that? Around town. People talk. People talk. Which meant Richard Blackwood was keeping tabs on me, which meant he was worried. Good. What exactly did people say? That you're planning some kind of revenge. That you're not done fighting. I smiled, and Jake actually flinched. Would that concern you? Tom, whatever happened between us, whatever mistakes were made, we don't have to be enemies. We could work together again. There's enough business in this town for both of us. You want to be partners again? I want to make things right. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken in Brussels. Pictures of my real mother, of the house where I should have grown up, of the family that had never stopped looking for me. Jake, do you know what this is? He looked at the photos, confused. No, this is my real family. The family I was stolen from when I was 5 years old. The family the Blackwoods kept me from for 34 years. Jake's face went pale. What are you talking about? I told him the story. watching his expression change from confusion to shock to something that might have been fear. Jesus, Tom, I had no idea. Of course you didn't. Nobody did. That was the point. I leaned back in the booth. But here's the thing, Jake. Now I do know, and I have resources. Real resources. The kind that can buy justice. What are you going to do? I'm going to take back everything that was stolen from me. My reputation, my business, my family. And I'm going to make sure everyone who helped Richard Blackwood understands the consequences of their choices. Jake was sweating now, despite the October chill in the air. Tom, I never meant for things to go this far. I was just trying to survive. I know, and you did survive. You got my clients, my reputation, my place in this community. The question is, what are you willing to do to keep it? What do you want? I pulled a business card from my pocket and slid it across the table. It was Riley Carson's card. I want you to call this number and tell her everything you know about Richard Blackwood's campaign against me. Names, dates, conversations, everything. I can't do that. He'll destroy me. Jake, let me explain something to you. Richard Blackwood is going to be destroyed whether you help me or not. The only question is whether you go down with him or whether you save yourself. Jake stared at the card like it might bite him. And if I cooperate, then when this is over, we'll talk about that partnership you mentioned. And if I don't? I smiled again, and this time I meant it to be frightening. Then you'll find out what it feels like to be on the wrong side of someone with unlimited resources and a very long memory. Jake pocketed the card. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Events have a way of moving quickly once they start. I left Jake sitting in the booth and walked out of Mickey's feeling better than I had in months. The old Tom Thompson would have begged for Jake's friendship, would have accepted his excuses and been grateful for whatever scraps of loyalty he offered. The new Tom Thompson had just served notice that the rules had changed. My phone rang as I was walking to my truck. Riley Carson. I've got preliminary information on the Blackwoods. You're going to want to see this. How bad is it? For them? Very bad. For you? Christmas morning. I drove to Riley's office with my heart pounding. The investigation was just getting started, but already I could feel the tide turning. Richard Blackwood had spent 5 years teaching me that power was everything in this world. He was about to get a very expensive lesson in just how right he was. Riley was waiting with a stack of documents and a grin that belonged in a shark tank. Tom, you're not going to believe what I found. Try me. Richard Blackwood is broke. I stared at her. What? Oh, he's got the house, the cars, the country club membership. But it's all mortgaged to the hilt. He's been living on credit for the past 3 years, borrowing against the family name and praying something would turn around. Riley spread financial documents across her desk. Bank statements, loan applications, credit reports. It gets better. You know why he went after your business so hard? Because you were competing for the same municipal contracts he needed to stay afloat. Blackwood Development has been bleeding money for years. I picked up a bank statement. Richard Blackwood, the man who treated me like a charity case, was 3 months behind on his mortgage. There's more, Riley continued. Your wife has been having an affair. That one didn't surprise me. With who? David Chen, Richard's business partner. It's been going on for about 2 years. Since before the divorce. Since before your business failed. Tom, I think this whole thing was planned. I think they wanted you out of the picture so Sarah could marry money. I sat back in my chair, pieces falling into place. Sarah's coldness, Richard's sudden hostility, the coordinated way my business had been destroyed. It hadn't been about protecting his daughter's reputation. It had been about positioning her for a more profitable marriage. What do you know about Chen? David Chen, 42, divorced, owns 3 restaurants and a catering business, worth about $2 million, most of it tied up in real estate. He's been financing some of Richard's projects in exchange for development rights. So Sarah trades down from a landscaper to a restaurateur, but trades up in net worth. That's about the size of it. There's just one problem with their plan. What's that? Riley grinned. They don't know about Brussels. They think you're still broke, still beaten, still the same guy they can push around. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the pawn shop below. A steady stream of people walked in and out, trading their valuables for enough cash to make it through another day. I'd been one of them not too long ago, desperate enough to consider pawning my wedding ring for gas money. Riley, I want you to expand the investigation. I want to know everything about David Chen, about Sarah's activities, about anyone who helped Richard Blackwood destroy me. That's going to be expensive. No, I don't care about expensive. I care about thorough. I wrote her another check, this one for $50,000. Riley's eyes widened. Tom, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning to remind this town that actions have consequences. And I'm planning to show Richard Blackwood what it feels like to lose everything. I left Riley's office and drove to the Blackwood estate, parking across the street where I could see the house where I'd grown up. It looked smaller than I remembered, less impressive. The lawn needed work. Ironic, considering how much business Richard had stolen from me to avoid paying for professional landscaping. Sarah's car was in the driveway, along with a silver BMW I didn't recognize. Chen's car, probably. I sat in my truck and watched the house, thinking about the little boy who'd been brought here 34 years ago. A stolen child, sold to people who'd treated him like an investment that hadn't paid off. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake Morrison. Called Riley, told her everything. I'm sorry, Tom. I should have done this years ago. I smiled and started the truck. Phase 1 was complete. Now Richard Blackwood would start feeling the pressure, would start understanding that his carefully constructed world was about to come apart. But that was just the beginning. Before this was over, everyone who'd betrayed me would understand the difference between mercy and weakness. And they'd learn that Tom Thompson was done being merciful.